distinguished group of speakers and a very distinguished group of guests, so please do not be offended if I don't recognize everybody individually, but I'd like to welcome especially the family of the folks that we've lost this past year. Welcome into the courtroom, welcome into our world, and we hope that you'll find this a meaningful time and as meaningful for you as it is for us. You have to forgive me, my father was a Baptist minister, so when I think about memorial services and funerals, I naturally think about the services that he gave, and he always had a list of go-to texts that he would like to read, but the one that always stuck out with me was a little bit different than some of the normal texts that you hear at memorial services. It's from Ecclesiastes 7, and it says, "It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of every man. The living should take this to heart." Ecclesiastes, if you're familiar with that book, is very odd. It's unusual. There's a lot of contrarian things in there. There's a lot of aphorisms and sayings for life. And this one always perplexed me because on its face, it's somewhat counterintuitive. I expect that if you were to poll this group whether people like to go to funerals or weddings or other parties, the parties would win out all the time. But I think what this passage tells us is there's something very important that we learn when we go to mourn with those who mourn, when we memorialize and take a moment to think about our friends and family who have passed away. And I think it's this. As we hear tributes today to these folks, they have a lot to teach us. Some of these folks taught us in life that you'll enjoy the service, and thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you, sir. I will now call on Marion Moses to memorialize Evans Taylor Barnett.
Thank you, Judge. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
When I first received the call last week to speak today to remember Van Barnett, I initially thought to myself, why me? Why me and not Pope Johnson? Why not Justice Toll? They were two of Van's close friends. Then I also thought to myself, I'm supposed to be playing in a golf tournament right now. And I really don't know if I have time to do both of these things. And then it hit me. It was at that time that I did realize why I was asked to speak today about Van Barnett. You see, my initial thoughts were selfish thoughts. And Van exemplified exactly the opposite of that. Van was a selfless man and gave his all to his family, his clients, and his friends. He was generous with his time and cheerfully gave his time to others. I was not being very generous or thoughtful in my initial response to this. And that was the lesson that I needed. That not only in our profession, but in life, we should be generous with our time to give to others. It is invaluable and it doesn't cost a thing. You might just make a positive difference in someone's life. Thank you, Van, for the God wink and the reminder of that. So I'm honored to speak today and to give even just a little bit of my time to remember a man well worth remembering. Van Barnett had a storied legal career. He was a Wofford graduate, as am I. Attended the University of South Carolina Law School and started his legal career at the Attorney General's office under Dan McLeod. Van spent most of his legal career at the firm of Whaley, McCutcheon, Johnson, and Barnett. Towards the end of his career, he and Pope Johnson formed Johnson and Barnett, where he practiced until his retirement in 2016. He left the law business and moved back to Greenwood to run his family's business, which was Carolina Pride Foods, until they sold it in 2019. There was a closeness in Van's law offices that reflected the compassion that they all had towards each other. Van was usually the first one in the office in the mornings. As such, Van would start the coffee for everyone. However, no one in his office dared take a cup of coffee until Van had his first. One of Van's biggest career achievements was being able to argue in front of the state Supreme Court. Justice Toll told Van's wife, Lynn, over the summer that Van was such a great writer and she enjoyed reading his briefs. Van had told Lynn many times that Justice Toll was very fair to him and that she would ask just the right questions to help draw out his points that he was arguing. he and Justice Toll had a strong mutual respect for one another. As successful a lawyer that Van had been, it did not compare to the relationship he had with his beloved wife of 26 years, Lynn. They had a love for each other that was remarkable. Van was passionate in his work and represented his clients. However, Lynn says he never brought it home with him. He was a very present person. If he was at work, he worked hard. But when he came home to Lynn, she had his undivided attention and his time. Van was very generous with his time for his friends, but most importantly, for his family. He was not the kind of lawyer who went to many social functions. He went to what he needed to, but he wanted to get right home to be with his family. Lynn says that once an attorney friend of theirs said that Van was inflexible. Lynn learned that Van indeed was inflexible. He was inflexible in standing up for his friends. He is inflexible for his family. He is inflexible towards his clients. He loved standing up for those who could not quite stand up for themselves. He stood for what is right, and integrity was never in question. Lynn deeply admired Van for the person he was. They were best friends from the moment they met. I first had the opportunity to hear about Van when I was in college. His daughter, Wynn, and I became close friends. I can still remember Wynn speaking highly of Daddy Van, as she referred to him. It was only later on that I discovered that Van and Wynn's mother, Lynn, had started dating when Wynn was 8 years old and got married when Wynn was 15. Van took Wynn in as his own and raised their family of 3. They were a very close and tight-knit family. Van was adored by his family, and he adored them. Where he had been known as Daddy Van by Wynn, he eventually lost that name when he became a grandfather to Wynn's 4 children. They all called him Big Daddy, and he loved every minute of it. There were very few, if any, sporting events or recitals for grandchildren that Big Daddy ever missed. Again, reflecting his generosity and giving of his time to others. Van loved being a granddaddy, and that brought him the most joy of all. Van also loved being outdoors and was an avid outdoor hunter and fisherman. He was a member of Mill Creek Hunt Club and spent a lot of time out there. Van once told Lynn that if he could do it over again, he might choose a career that would allow him to spend more time outdoors. I think he is on to something. Van and Lynn spent many evenings going on walks on the miles of dirt roads that they had at the property. It was on these walks in the woods or at their Isle of Palms beach house that Van and Lynn often would have their most intimate conversations about the important things in life. In closing, Van made a wonderful and successful career out of the practice of law. However, his legacy will be most remembered by his family as a man who was all in when it came to giving up his time for others. He was generous and passionate towards his clients, his friends, and especially his family. Today, we get to remember Van and be thankful for the positive impression he made on the legal profession, and to maybe just reflect on our own lives and be a little more generous with our time and a little more thoughtful of others. Yes, now I know why I was asked to speak today. Thank you, Van.
Thank you, Mr. Moses. Next, we'll hear from Carl Bremer about Hoover C. Blanton. Yes, sir.
When I was asked to speak on behalf of Mr. Blanton, I took it as a great honor. I thought a lot of Mr. Blanton. And I've tried to give a lot of thought to presenting this tribute to Mr. Blanton in the way that he would do it. And I thought a lot about him. And my thoughts in preparation of this tribute is how did I perceive Mr. Blanton? And my perception of Mr. Blanton was that Mr. Blanton had a mission. And that mission was to make everything that he touched better after he'd been involved than before he got involved. And from my perception, Mr. Blanton did that with every part of his life. He was an active servant of God. He was a participant, faithful participant, both in his church here in town and his one up at Bat Cave. He participated faithfully. He was a faithful and loving husband to his wife of many years, Cecile, and to his two sons, Lawson and Michael. And finally, he was a faithful servant to the South Carolina Bar. He fiercely represented all of his clients, and he was extraordinarily diligent to assure that all of his clients had the appropriate counsel, were advised, and once advised, he acted accordingly. As a member of the bar, he always strived to make the legal profession better. He was active in the local bar association, and he also started the local chapter of the American Board of Trial Advocates, which many persons in this room are participants and members. More importantly, he didn't just give lip service to the practice of law. Mr. Blanton was a person that you could describe as talking the talk and walking the walk. Mr. Blanton always held himself out in a professional manner and always conducted himself with a professional demeanor. Long before there was a civility code, there was the Blanton Code. Mr. Blanton was precise to a flaw. Okay. He was extraordinarily diligent in his pursuit to provide his clients with the best legal service and counsel. Now, from a personal perspective, it is my perspective that emulation of a person is the highest flattery. In my 33 years of practice of law, I've tried to emulate others in the practice of law, both their bad and their good. As my father told me one time, everyone has a use, even if it's to show as a horrible example. Hoover Blanton was a stellar example to follow. He was always caring, he was always interesting, and he always had something profound to say. My introduction to Mr. Blanton was, and the way I became associated with him was, I never actually worked with him. But when I was in law school, I started dating his assistant and actually married her 33 years ago today, okay? And he kind of took me under his wing and guided me along, and that was greatly appreciated. He told me one day that I had been practicing a year or so and had a little small trial in magistrate court, and things didn't go my way because I made a misstatement. I was talking to Mr. Blanton about it later, and he looked at me, and you know what he told me? He said, Carl, he said, you learn a lot more from your failures in life than you do your successes. And I haven't forgotten that. To me, Hoover Blanton was what a lawyer should be. He was honest. He had impeccable integrity. And what Mr. Blanton told you, you could bank on. As a tribute, I'd like to thank Mr. Blanton and his family for the influence that he's had on my career and my life, because I truly feel that Mr. Blanton has achieved his mission. I know I'm a better lawyer and a person for having known him. I hope to emulate his objective and can pass along to others what Hoover Blanton has passed along to me. May he rest in peace and God be with his soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bremer. We'll next hear from Weldon Johnson. Yes, sir.
You know, President Lincoln long ago said in a speech, little that we say or do here today will be long remembered. Mark Antony at Caesar's oration said, you know, the good that men do is often interred with their bones. Fortunately, we have this service, which is recorded, so that we do remember. Gary, Dave, excuse me, was a fraternity brother at Wofford. He was also my brother-in-law. He did not know my sister until law school. He graduated Wofford in 1967, went straight to law school with a commission in the United States Army as a lieutenant, deferred, went to law school. And I think I was in training at the academy at Quantico when I got a call from B. Said, I've been asked out by one of your fraternity brothers and want to know what you think of it. Her memory is that I told her that he was one of the few of my fraternity brothers that I would recommend she go out with. Many of my fraternity brothers could have been casted in Animal House. Anyway, they get married, and Gary is sent off to Vietnam, where he was decorated, came home, but you never heard him mention his service to his country. Just something that they did. I want to talk about several aspects of Gary. First is his life and career as a lawyer. You know, sometimes you are known by how you treat others. And in preparation for this, I went back to the obituary that was published and read the many memories and tributes. But two that stuck out to me were from members of the Office of the Register of Deeds, who remembered Gary because he always had a smile. And always took the time to ask, how are you doing? Then we have his career as a husband and a father and a grandfather. Gary grew up in Dillon, where he was an outstanding athlete at Dillon High School, president of the student body, participated in Boys State, and remarkably was the drum major for the Dillon High School marching band that performed in the Orange Bowl parade. And sometimes in family gatherings late in the evening, we could entice Gary to reprise his role as the high-stepping drum major. Family and church were important to Gary. He was married to be for 50 years. Excuse me. the father of 2 sons who are here today. Chris, his oldest, followed in Gary's and his grandfather's and uncle's steps and went to Wofford. Walker, however, started up I-26, knowing his dad was an avid Gamecock fan. But when he got to the split, he took a left and went to Clemson. Gary was blessed with 1 grandson and 1 to be. As a member of Shandon United Methodist Church, Gary held almost every office and was primarily remembered by many as the Sunday morning greeter. Always had a smile for everybody. It was contagious. Then we have Gary in his community service. As an Eagle Scout himself, he was the Cub Master, Scout Master for his 2 boys, both of whom made it to Eagle. He was a member, past president, of the Columbia-Sertoma Club, held all of the offices there. He worked tirelessly for the Carolina Children's Home, received their Service to Mankind Award, volunteered for 40 years at Town Theater. He was especially proud of his wife, Bee. She was a longtime director of the Shandon Preschool, through which many of your children probably have passed through. We pray for ourselves and all those who mourn his passing. He was a constant in this world. And a source of contagious happiness. To all who knew him. I'm sorry for the emotion. I miss him.
Senator Hutto will now tell us about Professor Freeman. Yes, sir.
Fiery, fierce, funny, a fighter. There are so many words out there, but it would take half the dictionary to describe all of the attributes that were embodied and displayed by John Freeman. Most of you knew John because John was there for us as a teacher, a mentor, a witness, a lawyer, and a friend. He was the voice of ethics in South Carolina and often quoted in the media on issues of public corruption. For over 30 years, Professor Freeman entered the classrooms at the University of South Carolina School of Law, where he taught, and I would just say not only entered, but entered with energy, enthusiasm, and passion. Few that that really nobody could match. I mean, if you knew John, he was passionate. And he taught ethics, he taught business law, and if you were in his class, you learned. 4 times John was voted outstanding faculty member. I did not get the opportunity to study with John as a student at USC, but there was rarely a time when I saw that he was teaching a CLE that I didn't sign up for his class on ethics. You know, it's one of those things we sort of dread, got to get my ethics hours in, but not if John Freeman was teaching. We all know that in the day-to-day practice of law, ethical questions arise. John Freeman was a phone call away. He offered unbiased and firm advice. By that, I mean he would tell you if you were wrong, but he would offer you suggestions on the best way to handle a situation. John could be blunt. As Steve Ham said, if you didn't want to know exactly what he was thinking, don't ask him. John Freeman was there for me and for many of you to lead us through the ethical jungle and entanglements that lawyers maneuver to avoid. But beyond his academic role and his service to his fellow bar members as a go-to guy on ethics, John was a trial lawyer, a ferocious advocate, a champion for consumers. Many have appropriately called John a giant. While he certainly was a giant, he fought for the little guy. Because of his actions, on behalf of his fellow man, many people who never knew John now live a better life. His work directly saved consumers and investors millions of dollars. You know, sometimes we have to do the tedious work of preparing the answers to interrogatories, but I always enjoyed seeing the reaction that big corporations got when they saw that my expert witness was John Freeman. I had the pleasure of being co-counsel with John on several cases. Getting to play good cop to John's bad cop in a mediation, priceless. From those experiences, I can tell you that no one worked harder than John. His brilliance shone through in his writing and his courtroom advocacy. While John was famously known for his tenacity, vim, and zeal, John did have a softer side. He loved his wife Nancy and their daughters Gretchen and Nora. He was extremely proud of their accomplishments. He cared about his friends. He was generous and compassionate. Not only do those in this courtroom and many others that John's life touched miss him, South Carolina misses John Freeman. John Freeman was a man for all seasons.
Thank you, Senator Hutto. Mr. John T. Lay.
Please, the court.
Yes, sir.
I'm aware that my glasses look funny. I broke my other pair. I am John T. Lay, and it is my great privilege to say a few words in honor of William Reed Harbison, Will, who passed away January 24th, 2021 after a courageous 3-year battle with cancer. I was not only Will's friend, but I had the honor of practicing law with him longer than anyone, along with Shelley Montague and Johnston Cox, at both the old Ellis Lawhorn law firm and at Gallivan White and Boyd. To stand before you today in this capacity is extraordinarily difficult because Will was beloved by so many, and his departure from this world came far too soon. The tremendous void of his absence still lingers for his family, for his friends, and his colleagues, but we take solace in the memories of his sly grin, his mischievous nature, his rare integrity, and his unshakable loyalty to family and friends. Will grew up primarily in Pensacola, Florida, attended college and law school at Washington and Lee, and he practiced law here in Columbia his entire career. He was a member of several firms during the course of his career, including Nelson Mullins, Sile Gray, the old Ellis Lawhorn, and until he finally made his home with us at Gallivan White and Boyd for the last 10 years of his practice. He focused primarily on workers' compensation and was admired, respected, and recognized as one of the finest workers' compensation lawyers in the state of South Carolina. His zealous advocacy was the subject of many epic stories. I witnessed it firsthand through the shared thin walls of our offices over the years. He could be fierce when he needed to be, but also was extraordinarily kind and just even to his adversaries. It was a wonderful dichotomy. Will's self-deprecating humor charmed everyone in our offices. He loved to think of himself as dashing and an imposing figure despite being packaged in a 6-foot, 150-pound frame. And if there was ever any doubt about how Will looked on a particular day, all you had to do was ask him. And he would tell you that he had achieved something that he thought was impossible. He had actually gotten better looking that day than the day before. Will's character was punctuated by unique strength rarely seen in this day and age. During COVID, fighting cancer in the midst of a pandemic, he came into the office almost every day. He worked. He worked his cases. He responded to clients. He prepared for hearings that were soon to come, all while feeling utterly awful. He would take naps on the couch in my office, giving him just enough energy to finish the day. And his colleagues at Gallivan Boyd watched in awe as he fought for 3 years and witnessed him endure unimaginable suffering with grace and silence. He never complained, and he inspired us every day as he faced this last battle of his life. This 3-year spectacle of grit epitomizes his devotion to our profession. But as committed and gifted as Will was as a lawyer, his profound legacy as his dear husband to Liz, father to Liza, Rebecca, and Wiley, and faithful friend to many. Will did not define himself merely as a lawyer, as lawyers often do. Will defined himself by the relationships he had with others. He had an incredibly charming and palpable charisma that drew people to him in a profound way. Will collected friends like a child collects rocks. Hundreds of people count Will as one of their 10 best friends. A remarkable feat with so many demands on a lawyer's time, whether playing golf really badly or tennis well. Will found a way to connect to you. He loved to debate anything, but particularly politics, but because of his deeply held beliefs and because he loved to stir the pot, as his wife Liz would say. Will's ability to connect and engage with almost anyone is exemplified by his membership in 2 book clubs. One, the Smart Book Club, and the other, the Greater Columbia Concealed Weapons and Literary Society, also known as the Dumb Book Club, of which there are several members in this room today, including myself. And that club has met for more than 25 years. Will helped stir the pot on many raucous meetings at the Dumb Book Club over the years, meetings that have always featured vigorous debate and that once devolved into a glorious physical confrontation at the Palmetto Club, of which Will was a part. Remarkably, Will was able to move between both groups without actually having to read any club selection for the month. Will's supreme relationships, however, were with his family. He had a passionate and deep love for his beautiful and loyal wife, Liz, and was so proud of his 3 successful children, Liza, Rebecca, and Wiley. Will knew what was important in life. His focus was always on the people that he loved. And that was really what defined him and created the legacy of his life, and his memory inspires us to do the same. We are fortunate witnesses of Will's enduring example of a life well lived. He was loved dearly and missed greatly.
Thank you. Judge Anderson will now tell us about Punky Holler.
May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
My great friend, James Edward Punky Holler, passed away on November the 21st, 2021, after nearly 50 years at the bar. He had perhaps one of the most interesting and colorful careers of any lawyer in our state's history. A star athlete at Dreher High School, he was recruited to attend the University of South Carolina by then-coach Warren Gazay, and thus began a lifelong commitment to the University of South Carolina. During his senior year in college, Punky was recruited by the Green Bay Packers and went on to play for legendary coach Vince Lombardi. He also played for the Pittsburgh Steelers and later played in Canada. While a professional athlete, he received permission from Dean Prince at the law school to study law during the off-season. Upon completing his football career, he returned to Columbia, where he opened his own law practice specializing in criminal law and family law. I first met Punky and Renee when I attended one of the Association for Justice conventions down on Hilton Head Island. Punky was proud of his service as convention chairman for many decades. And earlier this month, at its annual convention in Hilton Head, at the popular Saturday night dance, the dance was named in honor of Punky in recognition of his many years of service. In those early years, I remember Punky's engaging style, his magnetic personality, that big toothy grin, and his obvious love for the legal profession and his fellow attorneys. When I moved my duty station to Columbia in 1990, I walked into the old Elite Epicurean restaurant and noticed a group of businessmen and lawyers enjoying breakfast together. Long story short, I joined the breakfast group and for the next 30 years enjoyed the camaraderie and companionship of Punky and the team which he had assembled. Several of those people here today, Judge Bruce Williams was there. Several others in the audience were members of our breakfast group. In those sessions, we loved to tell war stories about the practice of law. One I remember very vividly is a story that was told about the time that Punky walked into a courtroom with Kermit King on the other side. Punky and his client looked over and saw that Kermit had 2 paralegals and 6 bankers' boxes of documents. All that Punky had was a legal pad and a pencil. Upon sensing his client's concern, Punky turned to him and simply said, "It's all up here. It's all up here." Throughout his career, Punky remained an avid sports fan. The home that he and Renee occupy here in Columbia was packed with items of sports memorabilia, hundreds of items of sports memorabilia. He never missed the annual Lombardi Players Reunion. The linebacker room at the USC football complex is named after him. Every year, Punky and Renee sponsored a world-class Super Bowl party, and I was fortunate enough to be on the invite list. The first one I attended, I looked around and I saw about 30 or 35 big, and I mean big, beefy ex-jocks. And I saw Punky and I said, "Punky, I know I'm getting a little pot belly on me, but I'm the skinniest guy in this room. What is it? You weren't friends with any skilled position players or kickers or anything?" He said, "Yeah, you are the skinniest guy in the room, but you're also the token Clemson fan here, and don't you forget it." In my office, I have a much smaller sports memorabilia collection. I've got a Johnny Unitas autographed helmet, a Mickey Mantle autographed bat, Trevor Lawrence autographed helmet. And last summer, I decided those Green Bay helmets are so colorful, I was going to order a helmet and get Punky to sign it. And here it is. I went to his office late July last year and signed this for me. We lost him barely 3 months later. I cannot let this occasion pass without recognition of Renee Holler, a lady who by her devotion, encouragement, and companionship brought Punky great happiness that emboldened him to achieve so much. Their life together was one in which they shared hopes and aspirations, always with unfailing courage and love and a little fun mixed in. It's been said that a man's best monument is his children. Punky was immensely proud of his children, Mary, Eddie, Mo, and Logan, their families, their careers, and their accomplishments. Punky's legacy as a lawyer and an athlete will be remembered by members of the bar and Gamecocks everywhere, and even a few of us Clemson fans. But more than his worldly success, we remember the spirit of Punky, his charisma, love of life and his family, his concern for others, and his heart as big as all outdoors. I shall look forward to seeing him again one day up on the big field. He truly played life to the fullest.
Thank you, Judge Anderson. Justice Hearn will now pay tribute to the late Judge Jones.
May it please the court.
Yes, ma'am.
As the Broadway song goes, I've heard it said that people come into your life for a reason. bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Dorothy Mobley Jones was a terrific lawyer, a beloved judge, and a wonderful human being. Dottie was also my best friend. We met when we were both law clerks together in the late 70s. Dottie in Barnwell for Circuit Court Judge Rodney Peoples, and me in Bamberg working for Julius J.B. Bubba Ness. We became fast friends there in the Second Circuit, and it was a friendship that lasted the rest of our lives. It was certainly a different time for women lawyers back then, but the two of us had a ball. We were both single, and we spent a lot of time together after work right here in Columbia at a place some of you may remember called the Wits End. Everyone fell in love with Dottie, so I had to invent a story to keep her from becoming entangled with a guy too early. So this was the story. Her name was Marilyn. My name was Lucy. We were in the Peace Corps, and we were leaving for Africa in the morning. The story worked like a charm until I introduced her to someone at the Wits End that had been in her section in law school. He looked at her confusingly and said, "Dottie, isn't that you?" We were in one another's weddings, and she was godmother to my daughter, Kathleen. Our families even went to Paris together for the millennium. Through the years, we laughed a lot. One of our favorite stunts was to excuse ourselves to the ladies' room when we were at a restaurant with friends, swap clothes with one another, and then see if anyone noticed. In fact, in Dottie's wedding picture, she is wearing my dress instead of her own. We were together on our way to a weekend at Camp Canoga in Hendersonville, North Carolina in 1999, when I got the call that all the other candidates had withdrawn and I was actually going to be Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals. We immediately pulled the car over, jumped out, ran around, acted like two crazy women, did a long happy dance there by the side of the highway. I was always so happy that she was there with me at that moment. And I also recall when she was running for her family court judgeship, it had been a particularly disheartening day for her at the General Assembly, and she called me in tears from her car, saying she couldn't do it anymore. She just couldn't do it. I talked her off the ledge. She pulled herself together, put on her lipstick, and marched right back in there and won. There was no better family court lawyer than Dottie Jones, and there was no better judge than Judge Jones. She was strict and demanding when she needed to be, but she was also kind and compassionate. Dottie never forgot what it was like to be a lawyer. In fact, she received the Matthew J. Perry Civility Award from this bar in 2014. And there was no better friend than Dottie. She is sorely missed by her family, her son and the light of her life, Fenley, her treasured cousins, Billy and Jimbo Whitney, and their families. But she is also so missed by her multitude of friends. I close by repeating the words in that song from Wicked I mentioned at the beginning. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. The next line of that song then concludes, well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. I know I am who I am today because I knew Dottie. She changed us all for good. My ringtone for Dottie has always been, and still is, somewhere over the rainbow. Darling girl, you left us all too soon, and it is still so hard to believe that you are gone, that we won't see that smile light up your face or hear your musical laughter. We miss you, we love you, and we know that you are now somewhere over the rainbow where skies are blue and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Hearn. The next tribute will be to Joe Roof by Judge Kevin McDonald. Yes, sir.
I'd like to welcome Joe Roof's family and his trusted paralegal, Jamie Early, who he loved very much. All of you, welcome. Carl Joseph Roof, known by his family and friends as Joe, was born in Columbia in 1938. He lived his whole life here, graduating from Columbia High School and then the University of South Carolina. After obtaining his law degree from the USC School of Law in 1963, he began practicing law here in downtown Columbia. He preferred the small law firm model and found success soloing or partnering with other talented lawyers. His practice grew as Columbia grew, and so did his stature in the bar. He ran for city council, he served on several state and county bar committees, and he was elected president of this Richland County Bar Association in 1987. I met Joe a few years later in 1996 when I joined the Sherrill and Roof law firm that Joe had formed with Henry Sherrill, Franchell Millender, and Dan Lott. And by then, Joe was truly a lawyer's lawyer, advising other attorneys on resolving their troublesome cases, all the while handling his own caseload that included the oversight of complex estates, commercial transactions, and banking litigation. I'm convinced he knew the South Carolina Probate Code by heart. And like Professor Freeman, who we also honor here today, Joe was an expert in legal ethics and was often sought out for his opinion and testimony in professional responsibility and malpractice cases. Suffice it to say, he was a very smart, accomplished lawyer. However, I'm certain that what made him a great lawyer was his giving heart and his passion for life and those around him. Joe was a longtime member and very active in his church, St. Paul's Lutheran, just a few blocks away here on Bull Street. And indeed, anytime the firm moved to a new location, Joe would have St. Paul's Reverend Harley come over and bless the new space. Joe supported the local arts, lending his magnificent tenor voice to musicals at Town Theater and a number of productions. It was not unusual to hear him singing the scales or practicing his lines behind his closed door before that night's performance. And Joe could make friends with just about anyone. He was the sort of person that could make friends in 15 minutes or make you smile in just a few seconds. Every year, he hosted his annual parking lot cookout for friends he had made throughout the year, with the attendees being a wonderful mix of people and their families, from bank presidents to farmers, and perhaps someone that Joe and his wife Lucy had just met that morning at the Waffle House or at their gourmet supper clubs that they hosted. Joe loved his family, and he truly cared about his colleagues and clients. He would take breaks from his desk work and drop by my office just to say hello and to see how I was doing that day. And if I paused or if I had a dilemma or a problem, work-wise or otherwise, he would pull up a chair and take the time to listen, no matter how busy he was himself. He did that for me, and he did that for everyone. I left Sherrill and Roof after 3 years to take a different path, but during my short time with him, I learned a great deal from Joe, and I'm very fortunate and grateful that he was my mentor and my friend. I want to thank you to the organizers of this Richland County Bar and the Memorial Service Committee for allowing me this opportunity to pay tribute to him.
Thank you, Judge McDonald. We will now hear from Judge Bruce Williams about Judge Short.
Thank you. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
It's an honor to be here with you to talk about my friend, Paul E. Short, Jr. I had a debate in trying to describe him. Should I call him great or good? And after looking at the definition, I decided that good is a larger and better definition. And you'll see as I describe Judge Short, when you're trying to describe a person, Judge Short was a good man. All who knew him know that to be true. Good means of favorable or praiseworthy character. Good makes him handsome. Suitable, free from injury, can be relied on, pleasant, deserving of respect, praiseworthy, and useful or beneficial. Paul Short was a good man. We have lots of examples of him being good because we know how he lived his life and how he made a difference in the lives of all he touched. It doesn't matter if we're talking about him personally or professionally. I had the good fortune to get to know him and to meet him over 20 years ago. A couple of years later, we were elected to the Court of Appeals, allowing our friendship to grow. We worked together on panels, and the best part was just being able to spend time sitting around and talking. We would play golf together with Judge Stilwell and when all were in Columbia and on a few other occasions. Sharon and I got to spend time with Paul and Linda over the years, during court meetings and on educational trips. In thinking about Paul, he did a lot. He was a son, he was a friend, he was a husband, father, grandfather, teacher, leader, counselor, mentor, lawyer, judge, and probably a few more roles that I've left out. All these roles had an impact on his life and all those who knew him. He was a good son who made his parents proud. He grew up on Mill Hill in Gastonia, North Carolina, and served as president of the student body. He attended Boise State, where he was elected Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, some indication of an interest in law to come. And then on to the Citadel. He was a proud bulldog. We had discussions about the Bulldogs and the Wofford Terriers. Being a Wofford Terrier, I enjoyed those discussions for several years. Once, and only once, did I hear him show any concern about his Bulldogs. It related to a long winning streak by Wofford. One day, as we were getting ready to walk in the courtroom for a hearing, he turned and congratulated me on Wofford's 15th victory in a row in football. I hated to do it, but as the door of the courtroom opened and we proceeded to enter, I whispered and reminded him it was 16 in a row. By then, we're in the courtroom, and he could not respond. He did recover his composure for court, and he did respond to me a little bit later. He was a little sensitive during those years, but the Citadel eventually returned to its winning ways, and he was fine. One thing I noticed about Paul was he had lots of friends, the kind of friends that you've known for years, even most of your life. They're the friends who will always be there for you. They're going to offer support and encouragement in good times and in bad. Not everyone has friends like that, but Paul did. He was a husband who loved Linda Short with all his heart. He would do anything in the world for her. Early in our friendship, I got to see them as senator and the judge. They were an impressive couple, both working to improve life with a purpose for the people in the community, and our state. After the senator retired and was not in Columbia as much, I noticed a change. When we finished our work, he could not wait to get home to be with her. Whether it was to head to the River House, the Mountain House, to their house in Chester, the reason was Linda. The only thing that I saw that could compete with that, not win, but compete, was when he was going to spend time with his children, Lindy and Melanie, and the grandchildren, Ariel, Noah, Blythe, and Mary Kendall. You could see the sparkle in his eye when he talked about them. He loved them very much. They already know that. What they probably don't know is how much and how well everyone else knew that, because he let it be known. He let it be known how much he cared and how much he loved them. He was very proud of them. As a leader, he saw the importance of service to others. After finishing USC Law School, he practiced law. He served as a deacon, an elder, Sunday school teacher, all the service clubs Chester had to offer. He set an example of serving his community. He served in the South Carolina House and was elected majority leader. Whether it was leadership in an elected position or a volunteer in the community of the church, we learned that his leadership had an impact. It improved the life of people around him and his community. That's just what Paul did. In his role as a teacher, he taught all of us lessons about how to treat each other, that being with respect and dignity. He loved, respected, and cared about all of his law clerks, even the few law clerks he hired that did not attend the Citadel. He loved all of you. He taught young lawyers around him how to be a good lawyer and a good judge. Most importantly, he showed them and us how to be a good person. He was a counselor and a mentor. You learned how important it is to be fair to everyone. If you watched and listened, that's what you saw. He set the example for everyone along the way. If you watched, you learned. I'll end with this thought. As a judge, he had a simple rule. It was always that we were trying to get it right, to find the right answer, and to do it in the right way. No matter how difficult it was going to be, it was always going to be done in the right way. He was a kind person and a smart judge. I could have made these remarks longer and more detailed, but Judge Short would not be happy with me. Anyone who knows him, he was one who followed the time limits in our court. He spoke often when the briefs in our cases were too long. He would ask, don't you know the definition of brief? It means to be brief. So out of respect for Judge Short's strong preference over the years, I've tried to remember the importance he placed on brevity and the reasons why. In Ecclesiastes, be not rash with thy mouth, and let the words be few. Or in Proverbs, he that hath knowledge spareth his words. St. Vincent Pallotti. Remember that Christian life is one of action and not of speech and daydreams. Let there be few words and many deeds. Let them be well done. Judge Short's words and deeds show a life well lived. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Williams. Alan Medlin will next speak in memory of Professor Howard Stravis.
Your Honor, may it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Howard was as good a person as I have ever known, and without question, the most well-rounded. He was brilliant, diligent, caring, loving, passionate, and he had a backbone. For me, Howard was a mentor and a teacher and a best friend and a brother. He and I worked together for 37 years and played together for 38 years. I'm a very lucky man to have had that relationship. Howard loved many things, but most of all, he loved teaching. In 1983, he bravely uprooted his career in a silk stocking Manhattan law firm to come here to teach, sight unseen. That was a stroke of extraordinary luck for the law school and lawyers. He was beloved by generations of students and by countless others, lawyers, doctors, venophiles, and basically everyone he ever met. I do not know anyone who had more friends and who was more beloved than Howard. Howard was beloved by his students for more than just his teaching. They loved him as a person. His end of semester parties for all of the students in his classes were legendary, introducing students to wine and gourmet goodies that many might never have otherwise experienced. He was famous for his love of wine and had a national reputation as a connoisseur and expert. We often joke that he was our most published scholar because he wrote the wine page found in the Zagat Tourist Guide. But Howard was so intent on teaching about wine that sometimes he could be a tad didactic. But that was the teacher in him. As an example, and I have many, but I'm going to give one. Some years ago, Wynton Marsalis came to play jazz at a club in Columbia. We put a table together. The group included Howard's doctor, who, like everyone else coming into Howard's celestial orbit, became a dear friend of his, and a professor who was on her first date with our doctor. The doctor's date was between me and the doctor. She had ordered a white wine, which in this sophisticated Columbia nightclub meant she had only one cheap choice. Howard arrived at the table, and because I was between Howard and the doctor's date, I began introducing them to each other, even though I had just met her. Halfway through the introduction, Howard spied the wine glass on the table. He grabbed it. He swirled it. He sniffed it. He swirled it. He sniffed it. He slammed it back down on the table, looked her in the eye, and said, "Brassy, brassy." By the way, the doctor and the professor got married. And of course, the professor also became dear friends with Howard because everyone did. He was one of those rare people who just make you feel better when you are with him. We had countless discussions over many years. When the discussion was serious, Howard's pure brilliance showed through. I watched him explain the most difficult concepts on an unlimited variety of topics in an understandable way to many people who had to be in awe of his intellect. I know I was. His ability to do that was why he was a phenomenal teacher and so beloved by his students. I cannot think of a single topic over the years that we discussed that he did not know an awful lot about, and he took the time to teach others, including me. As his dear friend Jamie Becker says, he was a true Renaissance man. When the conversation was not serious, he was wickedly funny, sometimes even silly, but always in good humor. In addition to Howard's other incomparable wonderful traits, he was never wrong. By that, of course, I don't mean he never made a mistake. God knows how many times I tried to help him find files that he had lost on his computer. But it wasn't that he was perfect, because no one is. That's not what I'm talking about. It's that he was never wrong in that he always meant to do the right thing. He had an unerring sense of what was right and proper, and he lived that way. Not once in our 38 years of close friendship did he ever suggest doing anything improper or inappropriate or wrong. His moral compass always pointed true north. Howard fought serious cancer for 2 years. He had to be in intense pain, but he never complained. He never missed his classes. He gave his exam. 2 days later, he passed away. Because of the generosity of Howard and his brother Ed, our law school, which you know has been woefully lacking in scholarship funds, is the recipient of a $1.2 million fund in his honor. We've named the faculty suite in his honor. Consequently, he will be missed, but he will always be remembered. First chance you get, raise a glass for him. He will be smiling down at you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Reed Smith. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. It is my privilege to honor the memory of Dalton Herbert Watkins, my friend, an excellent attorney, and an even better person. Dalton was born and grew up in Rock Hill. He graduated from Clemson when it was Clemson College. He loved his Tigers. Dalton was also a big fan of the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. He scheduled vacations so that he could watch the Cardinals play. I think Dalton would be pleased with the way that Jordan Montgomery has been pitching for the Cardinals since he was acquired from the Yankees, even though Jordan is a Gamecock. From the mid to late 60s, Dalton was an administrative assistant for Congressman Tom Geddes from Rock Hill. Dalton worked in the Washington and Rock Hill offices. I remember meeting Dalton for the first time in 1980. I was a law clerk for Bob Anderson, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy trustee. Dalton represented creditors in state courts and in the bankruptcy court. He came to the trustee's office that day to discuss a claim in a Chapter 7 case. I don't remember the results of that meeting, but I do remember the impression that Dalton made on a young law student. He was prepared, courteous as always, and effective. I did not hesitate a few years later to start a law practice with Dalton. From the late 80s until the mid-90s, Dalton and I practiced debtor-creditor law in a two-man law firm. Although Dalton had many friends and families that he loved dearly, I discovered that the practice of law was one of the most important things in Dalton's life. Once he became involved in a case, that case was the only thing that mattered. He developed what I would call tunnel vision, and he kept that focus until the case was over. Dalton was a hard worker. He was in the office early every morning. He stopped precisely at 11 a.m. every day for lunch, and he worked late into the night. We used to joke that he should just put a cot in the office. Dalton double-checked every document, even the envelopes, to make sure that the addresses matched what was in the letter. He wanted to make sure that everything was perfect so that his clients were represented well. He was a great attorney, and I respected him. In September 1989, after Hurricane Hugo had landed and the Columbia area was without power, I remember driving to our office on Richland Street to check on possible hurricane damage. I found Dalton already there, the doors propped open, and Dalton was reading a file in the natural light. Dalton was a zealous advocate for creditors' rights. A few of the issues that he litigated included the enforcement of a foreign judgment in South Carolina courts, protecting the rights of creditors in bankruptcy, and litigation in the bankruptcy court to determine the extent of a debtor's ability to avoid a judicial lien. Dalton Watkins was a professional and a true gentleman. He will be missed.
Thank you. I now ask all the family members of those memorialized here today to please stand. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the sacrifices that you've made to allow your family members to be engorged in the legal profession. Before we leave, are there any final remarks from the president of the bar, Mr. Carton? All right, well, thank you all for coming here. Thank you to my colleagues from the state bench, from the federal bench, all for your attendance, your participation. Members of the bar, a special thank you to Lamar Fayal and Mandy Wren for organizing this ceremony here today. I think that we don't do things like this often enough, and I hope that the words you've heard and some of the sentiments here today remind you not only to remember those that we love who have passed, but to love on those who are still with us every day. So thank you all for being here, and I would, there are refreshments out in the hallway. I would invite you all to stay and take part in that. But that is all for this ceremony, and this term of court is adjourned. Thank you.